Alright, so Assalamualaikum and a very good morning to our audience here today and our live stream audience. Firstly, I would like to introduce myself as the moderator for the day. I am Nara from Boleh Space.
Hi, my name is Hasbi and I am from Sioman. It's a mental health advocacy group.
Alright, so I would like to introduce the panel for the day. Hold on. For today, we have Miss Fada with us here from Anis. We have Mira here. You guys have read their profiles, I believe, before the session starts. So I will just introduce their names. We have Dr. Anthony with us and also Dr. Nur Aisyah. So for the first question, Hasbi, probably you would like to... Oh, okay. The house rules. My apologies.
Okay, sure. So these are the house rules for today. I'm just going to go over them very briefly because we're running a little bit behind schedule. So while we are primarily using English as the main language of the entire event, please feel free to speak in BM or campur-campur during your sharing or during your questions. That's not a problem. We would like for every session to be a safe space for intellectual discourse, which is a very rare commodity in Malaysia. So I think one of the things that we can do is that doesn't mean that no one is allowed to disagree, but when you are disagreeing, you are expected to be respectful in your language, actions, and behavior. Please avoid making personal attacks. Do not use foul language. I don't really agree with this, but that's fine. Do not use foul language or profanities. No heckling, and overall, let's be decent human beings and treat everyone equally and equitably. Thank you. If you would like to reproduce any of the sharing by the speakers, please do so responsibly and avoid misquoting or taking them out of context. I would go further to suggest that you ask the speakers for consent before sharing and show them what you want to share. This also goes for photos. Some of us may be on the spectrum here as well, and photo taking can be triggering. So if you want to take photos, please ask first, and if you want to upload, please ask again. Where was I? Okay. So for sharing from members of the audience specifically, Chatham House rules apply, which means you are free to use information and experiences shared, but please do not reveal their identity. So for instance, if anyone on the panel says, I don't like Muhyiddin Yassin, you can repeat that someone said, I don't like Muhyiddin Yassin, but don't say it was Hasbi who said it. Right? So that's generally how it works. This is important to allow for honest and rich discussions so that none of us feel scared to share what we really feel like without feeling vulnerable about being attacked outside. So this is important to allow for honest and rich discussion amongst members of the audience, amongst you guys. Keep your mobile phones on silent, please. I don't think I need to say this again and again, but we have to. You are not allowed to record the session. However, you may take videos or short clips for IG story. Again, consent. If you're taking any pictures, videos of people here, if you want to upload them, please ask for consent first. As the BIM, Bahasa Isyarat Malaysia, interpreters are seated on the right side, my right. For those who prefer it, you may be seated closer to the BIM interpreters for better view and access. And also you are encouraged to ask questions at the end of the session. When the Q&A session opens, please raise your hands and either Nara or myself will call you out accordingly. Thanks.
So just a bit of introduction before we start the actual discussion. So I'll just highlight on the title. Why is the whole session for the day is named the abandoned 16%? Because according to WHO, all right, the statistics is that the whole population of the world consists of 16% of people with disability. So this is why we are here today to highlight the issues that we are facing. So I'll go straight to the first question, yeah, for Dr. Anthony. How do you define disability? What is disability, in your own opinion?
Hello, everyone, and thank you for the invitation to be here. For me, disabilities are of varied and explained differently. People who are non-disabled think even the word disability is that you're missing a part of the body or a non-function of a part of our organs. And use that to blame that the disabilities are, are of group with a special defect, so to speak. And I think the blame, it's not a matter of blaming, but I think it's the mindset of society. And because society is not ready for persons with disabilities in terms of the development of infrastructure, the transport, the communication system, that is only done to suit those who are non-disabled and not accommodate persons with disability. Yeah, so that's what I meant by they're not ready or perhaps ignorant on the needs for persons with disabilities. That's it. Yeah, that's for now.
I actually have a list of other questions, but since Dr. Anthony brought up the word accommodate, I'd like, could you elaborate a bit further by what you mean when you use the term accommodate?
In terms of when we talk about accommodation, each OKU person has certain needs. So how do you provide that to give us the flexibility, perhaps in terms of mobility? Yeah. And also it's two parts. One is the PWDs themselves will tell them what are the accommodation they need, and two, the society must think in logical what would be the accommodation needs for these people. However, we are restricted because the law does not provide that. The law does not have reinforcement that these are the accommodation needs to be prepared or to be ready to accommodate our persons with disabilities. Yeah, and because the law does not provide that, persons with disabilities always struggle because they have to always inform, say, so that's a lot of effort throughout the years. And for some non-disabled people, they don't understand why you need this and all that. So a lot of explanation has to go into it.
Thank you. So Miss Mira wanted to share something, but I was about to point a question to you. So, yeah, sure. You can add on to the point, and I'll ask another question to the point. So we were talking about accommodation and everything, right? So now we want to look into the legal and policy and the structure of how the laws are in Malaysia. So what do you believe can be improved, or how the policymakers can assist us in terms of accommodating per se? Yeah.
Kejap. helps to switch it on. Yeah. Thank you for inviting me, everyone, and kudos to Taylor's University for having this session. I'm happy to be here amongst all of you. First, before I touch on Anthony's point on reasonable accommodation, I just want to say our federal constitution needs to be amended. Article 8 says that all of us are equal before the law. Like this, I'll be eating it up now. All of us are equal before the law. But Article 8.2 of the federal constitution says that you cannot be discriminated on the grounds of gender, which was included in 2001, race, religion, etc. But disability is not there. It's not a ground. And that's the first thing that legislators need to do. And we have been advocating, I think this whole group here of activists have been advocating for that. Secondly, we have a Persons with Disability Act. But it is a bit of a useless piece of legislation, in my opinion, because it has some rights, but not enough because of various things. One, we need a comprehensive definition of the types of disability that there are. Certain disabilities need to be included. Number two, discrimination is not defined. Malaysia ratified CRPD, the convention, but the act does not mirror the convention's rights. So discrimination has to be defined. We do not have penalties in our act. Can you imagine an act without penalties? So when your right as a person with disability is violated, what do? You go. And there must be a redress mechanism like a tribunal. We don't want to go to court. We need a tribunal which is more affordable and less adversarial. Then reasonable accommodation. We have it in the section on education, reasonable accommodation. But there's a whole discussion on that, why I don't agree that the comparison is made between persons with disability and persons without. If you look at the convention, it does not say that. It says persons with disability and others. There's a whole big discussion on that. I won't go to that point. So reasonable accommodation is only afforded in the education section, but not in employment. And that is why we haven't even reached the 1% OKU in employment. And the other point is we are advocating for a disability commissioner. Because if you want to mainstream disability issues, like how I come from the women's activist background, and we have been advocating for gender issues, mainstreaming gender issues, and I believe disability needs to be mainstream. If not, we will be left behind, as we are already. We need legislators, politicians, we need the schools, the universities, and even when you start from young, to talk about disability and be inclusive. And what else? I can go on, maybe my 3 minutes is up.
Yeah, we shall be focusing on other questions now.
Yeah. I just want to follow up before I get to you. Very, very sorry. Just to give some context, I'm also disabled, but it's invisible. I have bipolar disorder, and that's an invisible disability. And picking up from what Dr. Anthony shared and Mira shared earlier, my own issue with reasonable accommodations is the word reasonable is not defined by this disabled person. It's defined by non-disabled persons. And I think that's a power imbalance. So I want to shift a little bit of the conversation towards the experience of PWD themselves in communities. So I want to ask Dr. Noraisha what her experience has been as a disabled person with a very visible disability, living in Malaysia, what kind of barriers you have experienced, what kind of attitudes you have experienced. Try not to get too animated.
Inshallah. Thank you very much, Hasbi, for your question. So Hasbi has asked me about my lived experience. Um, I think we went through a lot together, Hasbi Maputra and myself during the PRU 15, during the last general elections. And to pick up from what Dr. Anthony had also mentioned in terms of being accommodated, all right? So going back, I mean, this is where it gets really interesting because the panelists here today, I went to the same school as Puan Fada Noor. We were both from Asunta, both primary and secondary. So I would say that as far as schools go, Asunta is one of the best when it comes to accepting people with disabilities. I wasn't always on a wheelchair. I went throughout school on crutches, but again, also because I had early intervention. I have highly educated parents. My father was the first head librarian of UKM. My mom was the Deputy Director General of National Archives. So yes, I benefited greatly coming from a highly educated family. Parents who were very willing to fight for me. But of course, my father passed away when I was 2 years old. So I appreciate what my mother had gone through to fight for me. And so equality, or the sense of equality, actually comes from the home. It's always where you come from. So if you feel that you are equal, you then expect no less from everyone else. And I can truly say that I didn't see myself as a person with disability. I didn't even understand what it meant between the boundaries of my home, my grandmother who raised me, my mom, my brother, my sister. So I had an excellent childhood. I went to Asunta. My head girl at one point was Puan Fada Noor. She's powerhouse there. So I think all in all, as I grew older, and I think the last major experience at Putrajaya, that was hugely eye-opening for me. Honestly, I'm 2 years away from being 50. I'm 48 this year. I would say that that experience, wow, you understand how behind Malaysia is once you become a candidate for the general elections. There is so much to do, so much to fight for our people. But I don't want to say too much. I know we have time constraint, but I do want to say that I'm glad, whatever it is, whatever people have to say about Akta OKU 2008, I'm super happy that we have it. I mean, I remember I was a fresh PhD. And when I came back from England, I was asked to go to Parliament when I think Sharizat Jalil was going to present it in Parliament. I was there on crutches. I didn't want to be photographed with her. I didn't want to have anything to do with politicians back then. Because I felt it's very important that I build up on who I am, what I am, my vocation. But I've come to the point whereby I've thrown myself into not just advocacy, but I realized that I cannot do anything for my spina bifida children unless, that's what I have, my spina bifida. I can't do anything for my spina bifida children until and unless Akta OKU 2008 is enforceable. But for the people who did do, Helen Chin being one of them, I'm extremely grateful that we do at least have this piece of legislation. And the faster we make it enforceable, the happier I will be for everyone.
My apologies, Dr. Aisha. I would like to ask a follow-up question. Is there any intersection that you see as a woman and also a disabled person navigating your life here in Malaysia?
Honestly, not really. I think it's quite sad, really, that the fact that I sit on a wheelchair and I actually have advantages over other people with disabilities in Malaysia, just because people can see, oh, you know, she sits on a wheelchair. So it's ridiculous, because I give you a very specific example. My spina bifida children, all spina bifida can walk. Given given early intervention, given correct exercises, you can stand them up and you can make them walk. I did. My level of lesion, I wasn't supposed to walk, but with correct physiotherapy, with a highly intelligent and educated mother, with an excellent doctor, Dr. Zaliha Omar, I walked throughout school, primary, secondary, etc. And it's atrocious that my spina bifida children now, when applying for an OKU card, the questions that their parents get asked is, macam mana tuan puan tahu yang anak tuan puan akan OKU selamanya? I mean, what kind of question is that? It has to be rooted in the medical system, disability, so that the OKU status cannot be scammed.
Right.
It must be, the legal side of it must be anchored to the medical system. And I have said this many times. I have tweeted about this many times. In my opinion, it should be based on the International Classification of Diseases.
Okay, if I may add, right? Because, okay, just to add on to what she said, I am also a disabled person, and she was saying that she wasn't like this previously, and she was adapting in a different way. For me, myself, I used to not use any aids, right? Walking around. It used to be just like normal for me, and you can clearly see a difference. As she was mentioning just now, the people around perception, you know, I can see the difference as well. So, I when we talk about hopes and dreams in Malaysian context, we just want people to see us as a person, not a person who is bound by aid or any sort of assistance or, yeah. So. Yeah, sure. Okay.
I would like to intervene and humbly disagree with Dr. Nur Aisha. Only because rooting disability in the medical system, one, adds stigma and discrimination. Two, healthcare is not accessible. Healthcare is not accessible. So we're adding more barriers. Now, again, respectfully disagreeing, because the way I look at it, and again, my advantage is because I don't look disabled. My advantage is that I don't face the physical barriers to access, but I do face, because of my mental disorder, I do face a lot of stigma and discrimination. There are no protections in the legal system in terms of non-discrimination in employment, non-discrimination in education, non-discrimination in many parts of society. So I think the medical understanding of disability is useful up to a point, the point being where it becomes a barrier to support and access. If you cannot get a diagnosis and therefore your OKU-ness is not acknowledged by the state, how are you going to get access for support and help? That is a very important part of the conversation where I don't think many people want to talk about that so much. But I'm going to. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's also stigma, and I don't. The stigma doesn't really come from the disabled persons themselves. We see ourselves as this is how we are, but the rest of society tends to look at disabled persons as somehow being lesser. We're not allowed to. I can't even qualify for insurance coverage. Yeah, so it's. I can understand where the medical model of disability helps some people conceptualize disability, and I completely understand why, because it lets you understand. But the fact that we are not discussing the stigma and discrimination that surrounds that, I think that's very, very, it's a disservice to a lot of people with invisible disabilities. Again, no disrespect meant. I am going to pass the mic over to Mara because I think she has a follow-up question for our last guest on the end.
Okay, before I pass the mic to Ms. Fada, I would like to add on because I think there is something very important that we should be highlighting that I don't think we are able to today. Just note that legally, there should be 1% of OKUs in the workforce today. But the law has been implemented since the 80s. And yeah, the policy, my apologies. The policy itself has been implemented since 1980 and no amendment has been done to this day. And yet, the 1% the 1% workforce has still not been fulfilled even over 40 years. All right, so I think that is one thing that we should be highlighting today, just on the surface level. I just want to state the facts out there, you know, for the people to understand. So to Ms. Fada, okay, as the perspective of a non-disabled person on this panel, how do you believe the public could, you know, help or from your view itself, how does the issues that we highlight today, like accessibility, you know, proper implementations of the law, yada yada, right? On the things that we have spoken today, how do you believe the public could play a part in terms of, you know, making things, you know, better for
Yes.
us in general?
Understood.
Yeah.
Thank you. How I see it is this: we have policy. What she mentioned just now is not law; it's actually government policy for government departments. That 1% of their workforce for every jabatan must be an OKU person. The question is, why is it not implemented? It's only fully implemented at JKM. So Jabatan Kebajikan Masyarakat can proudly say that they have adhered to that 1% rule, but not the other ministries and agencies. And why? Because sometimes this thing is overlooked and people generally do not understand the issues facing the disabled. We must realize that when it comes to the disabled community, the OKU community, it's not one issue. It's not a mere medical issue. It is medical, education, even political and social. So we are looking at a whole range of spectrum of issues which must be handled by the government. And they themselves do not understand it fully. So just imagine how the government officers are going to really digest and implement it as a policy of their department. Obviously, what is needed is education and advocacy, because the failure of understanding what these issues are, that you have to go beyond education, beyond medical to even social issues, means that you need to really have a proper study presented and digested. When I say a study, a lot of studies have been done, yes, but have they been appreciated and fully digested? I would say no, because from my experience, sometimes the kind of issues they raise when it comes to OKU, okay, they talk about facilities for OKU with wheelchair, but they do not address issues concerning OKU with hidden disabilities or OKU with autism, for instance. They do not even understand what it means. So advocacy is not to be just a simple act of talking about it, but to really channel it through the media. That's where the media play an important role. And also for the politicians to have the political will to want to understand what is the best narrative for the OKU community. So unless and until we appreciate that we need to design a solution for this, how do you make people understand it fully? Then it will still be at a rut. A very simple example, I take part in advocacy programs for parents. Even parents themselves do not understand their children. And for me, I have a child with special needs, so it's always a journey, learning experience and journey for me as well. But I do see that some parents are not even empathetic towards their own children, much less the entire community. Dr. Aisha is very lucky because she's got a wonderful mother who really takes care of her. But a lot of the children, OKU children, are just left behind. So whose responsibility? Obviously, it must be the state, and obviously the government must step in. The question is, do we have people in the government who actually understand what needs to be done? Because when the Majlis, I was part of the Majlis Tindakan OKU many years ago in Selangor, and we had a seminar, we had a convention on OKU rights, and one of the things we presented and pushed for was the establishment of a commissioner for OKU, and also to have a similar to a tribunal. That's what we talked about. When this idea was brought forward, we said we were made to understand that it cannot be done yet, because that's why they have actually appointed commissioner for children, because apparently children's issues are more pressing. So the question is, when is the OKU's turn going to come? So I mean, I can understand there are lots of issues, social issues that we have to handle. But personally, I think number one we should do is to cut JKM into 4. I mean, it cannot just do kebajikan masyarakat including OKU, warga emas, miskin dan fakir. You know, you must separate them. And OKU itself must be a whole department or ministry on its own, because you are talking about issues which require intra-governmental, intra-ministerial funding between education, between, say, Ministry of Education and Ministry of Health. They need to start talking to each other, because if in Ministry of Health you have therapy, you go for therapy once a month in hospital, your problem is not going to be solved, because when it comes to cognitive issues, it needs to be addressed with the help of the Ministry of Education. That's why the solution that we foresee is feasible, is one that intermarries the job scopes of the different ministers and the ministries. So there must be political will, there must be a clear solution which will transcend through ministries, and there must be a clear narrative. What are we going to do when it comes to the enforcement of the legislation? We can pass, we can amend, but how are we going to put it to work?
Yes, Ms. Farah, thank you. I think Mira has something to add on as well.
I think earlier Anthony mentioned about barriers. When you talk about, I mean, we used to have a medical model, but thank God we've changed it to a social model now. We're looking at barriers that can be removed. We talked about physical barriers, digital barriers, whether it's accessible to the blind, and then visual, hearing, and most importantly, attitudinal barriers. And that is very much when persons without disabilities who have very much an ableist kind of attitude, where the discrimination is in favor of persons without disabilities, we take it for granted. For example, during a hiring process in employment, when you hire someone, you advertise in the papers or on websites. Is it accessible to persons with disability? I mean, even as simple as hiring processes, we got to be inclusive. And when in employment too, you've got to be accessible. So attitudinal barriers can be removed, and that's where, when Fada said about the media, actually the media is the fourth pillar in democracy. And the media can play such an important role, and I think media is online today. Are you Javi. Yeah. And, you can play such an important role in raising awareness. This university has started that role process. And the media can help us even in describing a person with disability with respectful and accurate description of a person with disability, and don't use words such as normal or abnormal or some disrespectful language. All of us want to be respected when we are addressed. So please look at the person itself and not the disability, because it is the environment that disables us and not the disability.
My apologies. I have to. Okay, you're done. Okay. I would like to add on the points of employment. Yeah, based on my own experience. Just to highlight, I am currently working with Maybank under recovery department. All right. So I had my very own harsh experience, I would say. Usually in employment, right? Online during COVID, right? Online interviews were a thing and everything, right? But I had to go to physical interviews just because they wanted to see whether or not I am able enough to execute the task that was going to be appointed to me. So that is already one barrier over there. Access is already an issue of access. So okay, I shall not be sharing anymore, but this is just a highlight, additional point. I will be directing a question to Dr. Anthony. All right, so what do you wish the non-disabled would do or understand in our standpoint in terms of what they need to do or what can be done, your life experience, yeah.
I think for all of us now, for the non-disabled persons in the room here, you also have some limitations, right? So what are your limitations? Can you fly like a Superman? You can't. Everything you can't, right? So each of us have our own limitation. So what do you do? So people innovate helicopters, paragliding to make you feel that you can fly or go to another place. So it's the same with persons with disabilities. So what makes it like, for example, blurry for some of our friends who are blind? And how do we have communication access or be able to communicate with you? And how do we access to maybe websites or links? So whatever is done for non-disabled person, if these accommodations can be done, then we can also become independent. But right now, we are also restricted and have some of these restrictions. So, and again, ask yourself, you do use a lot of digital, digital devices and so forth. So that's just an idea that, if you can fly, why not the persons with disability as well? But do understand. Okay. However, many of the materials are not in Braille, for example, or many do not use the services of a sign language interpreter, or even these are all ignored or put aside just to accommodate to those who are non-disabled. And so when we talk about the development of anything for the persons in Malaysia, for example, the infrastructure, they always think of the non-disabled person, like they have staircase or no elevators and so forth. And if we, the disabled persons, continue to have that attitude and also continue to say, oh, the persons of disabilities don't need that, don't need to benefit from that. So the building of the infrastructure, the communication device will continue to limit us beyond our abilities. Yeah, but if we can have all this accommodation, it's a win-win situation. Both disabled and the non-disabled would benefit from that. So that's why I'm asking for the society first to understand, for each individual persons with disabilities. And also, sorry, I want to add, I had the experience to be educated in Gallaudet University to do my second master's, and that's the one and only university for the deaf. And the main point was everybody signs that there, regardless whether you're hearing or not, and there were no barriers at all. I truly enjoyed my stay or my learning experience. But however, if I'm out in the open, the environment, of course, one has these frustrations and barrier. And the Gallaudet committee also did discuss on, the no smoking sign that you put, right? Yeah. And if you want to smoke, you go over there, another place to smoke. So the Gallaudet University had this innovation. Yeah, they put the phone with a barrier there. So you cannot use the phone to make a call or whatever to speak. If you want to speak, you go another place. Because that space is used for accessibility sign language only. So I that is something, that hearing people could then understand or relate to. That these are an avenue for everyone to be equal. And not just an advantage that you can speak on the phone and the rest cannot. But I guess that's not logic. Because some people can suddenly, get a call if it's a business or emergency from home, and you cannot answer it now. You have to run off somewhere else to answer your phone, just as you would go somewhere else to smoke. Yeah, so basically, just an idea.
Okay, I would like to add on something, right, to the discussion. Just know that I want people to realize that we are doing this not for our own benefits. It's for the public, because you will never realize or you will never know when you will ever become disabled, even temporary or permanently, right? So that's a very interesting discussion I had with an architect previously when I had a different session. He was telling people, he was asking people, he said, are you going to be not worried if you were to let your old parents outside in KL without any assistance? So that, you answer that question, if you answer it no, you know already that it's not accessible. And we are approaching to an aging nation. People need to realize that accessibility is not just for disabled people, but also for people with, who are able and aging. They need to use walking sticks and everything. So I want to highlight that point for this discussion specifically. Yeah.
Okay, I've got another question but this is for Dr. Naraisha, but before that, I just want to add a little bit onto Nara's point. There is a reason why it's called universal access. A lot of people have this idea that accessibility is an OKU thing, separate. It's just for us. No, it's not. It's for everyone. So if we can enfranchise, protect, and promote and empower the weakest and most vulnerable sections of the community. Everyone else who is not disabled will also reap the benefits, right? So you guys are gonna grow old, hopefully. You're gonna grow older, hopefully. Your knees are not, you may not know it now, but your knees are not going to last forever. Your back is not going to last forever. Your hearing is not going to last forever. So investing in universal access now is, I think, one of the most logical things for our society to do. So then so that's my intervention. So my question for Dr. Naresha, and this is specific to your experience as the disabled candidate campaigning in Putrajaya, because we want to highlight, I guess, the lived experience of persons with disabilities in their own niches of life, right? So can you share with us what was your experience like on the campaign trail, meeting with people? Were they, I don't like using this word, but were they accepting of a disabled candidate? And how do you think they perceived you as? And the last part of that question is basically, what kind of barriers to you specifically did you experience?
Okay, thank you very much for your question. Right, so I'm very glad for the 3 to 4 minutes that I think I have for, in order to be able to answer the questions, because I would like to comment a little bit about some of the comments that have been made previously. But I will honor Hasbi's question first. So in terms of people's level of acceptance, all right? So I'm just going to give a little bit of background, all right? I've had 15 years experience as a medical faculty lecturer at University Malaya, all right? So my PhD was on neurobiology, right? My PhD from University College London was on the development of the brain and the spinal cord. And I cannot reiterate and underline this ever so strongly. People are people. Wherever you go, anywhere in the world, people are people, and everyone have got their fears and wants and expectations in life. So I got the same thing, a similar thing in P125 in Putrajaya. People are people. In general, if the question is what were their perceptions to me as a candidate, as always, people are kinder and nicer and more understanding when you yourself open up to a conversation, willingness to listen, willingness to understand, one's trials and tribulations, so to speak. So in general, I would say in Putrajaya, I enjoyed my walkabouts. I enjoyed talking to the people, to the rakyat. I honestly wanted to spend as much time. In fact, I was carrying around a notebook. I always carry around a notebook and a pen because I want to know, and I'm still following up. I still go to Putrajaya every Friday, every fourth Friday of the month. I keep up because when I joined Keadilan, I made it, I told myself, I have to do this because I really want to change things for the rakyat. I really want to change things for the rakyat, meaning that I really need to know the rakyat. And the people that I'm serving are not just people with disabilities, but also the general public, everyone. Everyone have got issues, which is why I want to comment a little bit about this idea of course, medical model versus social model. In my book, in the book of Noraisha Maidin binti Haji Abdul Aziz, I was raised by a very practical and pragmatic mother. To me, it is not about what you call it. So it was an anathema to me to when all these designations or you have this rule and that rule and I don't like labels because I like to understand mechanisms. What can we actually and truly put in place? And the reason why I repeatedly talked about international classification of diseases, because this is one topic, and I think you cannot run away. You cannot run away, even though it's a highly uncomfortable topic, is because resources are not unlimited. Let's just put it this way. Resources are not unlimited, and so the government cannot give everything to everyone whenever we want it, however we want it, as we demand, even if we stomp our feet on it. So as a scientist, I believe in mechanisms. So to me, and the reason why I champion the international classification of diseases, because I myself, as an advocate for spina bifida, having looked after children with spina bifida, because the past 15 years of my life, being a medical faculty lecturer, even though I was put in parasitology department because people didn't like my verbosity, right? But I was happy in parasitology because I had labs. I could do my work on neural tube defects. I was very, very happy. And so I find that, again, I disagree that it is just the public stigmatizing the OKU card. It is also the families, because the families, especially when the child is a baby, they do not know how a spina bifida child, whether, how that child is going to develop. Like, I look like a completely normal child. Okay, we're not supposed to use that word. But again, this is the word being used by everyone else in the world. Normal, abnormal, kurang upaya, tidak kurang upaya, whatever. Whatever the labels are. The point is that we have to move ahead with clear mechanisms on how to help our people. And the biggest issues I face are mothers and fathers who refuse to allow me to apply for the OKU card. I mean, I was doing everything. I would help them fill up the forms. I would submit the forms because I was fed up looking at children with spina bifida getting delayed treatments because they could not access it. So yes, access to health care is not equal for everyone. That I completely and 100% agree wholeheartedly with Hasbi. And this applies, our issues is an issue of class. We do not have rules and regulations which apply similarly to everyone. And that is the major issue. And so that was how I addressed my constituents in P125. I addressed them by trying to understand their issues. Now, did everyone treat me well? No, obviously not. And in fact, the people who were supposed to treat me well were the ones who treated me the worst. and sad to say, our political parties, all of them, including mine, we're behind. We are behind. So I hope today's session leads us somewhere that is not just talk. And again, if you were to ask me, Puan Fada, Puan Mira, I'm not a fan of the commissioners, I'm not a fan of the OKU senators. I'm going to be completely honest, because I don't see us getting to grasp with all the things that we need to get to grasp, and I don't see the mechanisms put in place. And I'm nearly 50 years old, and I'm tired. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aisha, for that extremely honest sharing. Again, Chatham House rules. Someone said they don't like the OKU senator. No one says who said it, okay? Those are the rules. So we are actually at the end of our allotted time, so we are going to shift. I want to thank all the panelists for the very extremely honest sharing sessions. I know for some of us it's not easy to be open and vulnerable, especially in a public setting. And I'm appreciative of the fact that no one started wrestling. No one attacked anyone. So I'm glad. I want to thank all the panelists for the sharing. And we are going to move to the Q&A.
Yeah.
Do we have to say anything before the Q&A?
No, just.
Okay, so the Q&A is this, very, very simple. Keep questions short and concise. Direct each question to a specific speaker at a time. If you are speaking to Dr. Anthony, please look at Dr. Anthony, not at the sign language interpreter. Because that's who you are talking to. You're talking to Dr. Anthony. do not keep it open and say anyone can answer, because I will jump in. Each speaker should speak for 3 to 4 minutes at a time. If a speaker goes on for too long, please cut them off as okay, that's for me. Please cut them off as smoothly as possible. I'm very sorry. I'm going to be keeping an eye on the schedule. Okay, so does anyone have any questions right now? I want to keep the session moving very quickly, so maybe 2 or 3 questions first. Gentleman in white in the back, please. Can you stand up? Or introduce yourself. No need to stand up, sorry. Introduce yourself, ask a question, and who it is directed to. Should be a green light if it's on. Okay, great.
Test.
Hello, my name is Kwe. I'm a student at Taylor's. I'm 19. My question is directed to Miss Mara. Or Mara, I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name.
No problem.
My question would be, is there any any anti-hate speech law or any sort of law reforms that could be done in Malaysia or even within media itself to prevent discrimination against people with disabilities and to make sure that discourse around disabilities are centered around a neutral viewpoint or even a positive viewpoint that empowers people? Because I feel that not only is media important, it also means that media changes the perception of people. And so when you have media that could possibly be negative or even discriminatory, you are causing people to be misled and have these negative perceptions and attitudes.
Right. Yeah.
Question.
Okay.
Before we answer, do we have any other questions? I want to answer in a row. Okay. Adika, please. And then Beatrice. I know you guys already. Crony skip.
Okay, my name is Adika. I have questions to all the panelists, excluding the moderator. Okay, do you agree that it was the coming of capitalism that created disability as an individual problem, and that it was not until the 21st century that this came to be challenged largely by radicalized disabled persons?
Okay.
So we have a more serious question there. Thank you. Beatrice, question for you. Then we'll get the panel to answer, okay?
Hi, thank you. My name is Beatrice. I'm autistic and I run an NGO. So my question is directed to Puan Fada. I really like what you said, like how creating OKU as a different unit. But even in that self, like OKU itself is broken down to so many different definitions, and how do we define it? And I'm going to make this as also a comment, like, what you said is one thing, but as I see it now from the field that I worked in, the practice is very different, even in ANIS as itself. What is that gap? Maybe help us understand of that gap as well.
Sorry, Beatrice, the question was, what is the gap between what we say and what we do?
Yeah, between like the intentions of what we say and the directions that we put out, which a lot of people actually don't know. Like I have to come and attend a talk and, to find out. But then when I see what's being practiced, let me tell you, it's not great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now we're going to start with this first. Sure, take another question first.
I'm so sorry. Hi, my name is Yana. Sorry, basically there's 2 persons from Boleh Space lah, because I'm also from Boleh Space. So my question is, what is the role of our OKU senators as well as our Majlis Kebangsaan bagi orang kurang upaya, and do they answer to us disabled Malaysians? Thank you.
Okay, this is not going to be easy question to answer.
Okay. I think we should answer the ones that we have first. Okay. So for my question specifically, he was asking about the media. Actually, I am very interested in that field, and I have been talking a lot about that. all right, especially in terms of the language in the media, all right. So thank you so much, because I didn't have at the time to highlight on the issue. Okay, so I would appreciate, right, since we have many media representations here for today, all right, there's something we call as inspiration porn in the media, all right, for OKU disabled, right? Please don't use that. Please don't use that when you represent us in the media, because the stories and the representation when it comes to the media is always sappy. You have to, the representation is not always positive. You should represent us who are successful out there, you know, who have their careers, who are like us here right now on the panel, right? It's always and the language you use is not according to the Acta OKU 2008. And here I am wanting to highlight as a language specialist, all right? The right term is orang kurang upaya, bukan kelainan upaya, ya, according to Acta OKU 2008. It has been like that since, and I don't think it will ever change, all right? So would really appreciate that if you guys could, you know, especially in terms of the language lah, first, all right? I will, yeah, so I'll pass the mic to the next question.
Just to add, your question was asking specifically about hate speech legislation. Do we have any laws? No, we don't. We have CMA 233, which is basically Akta Sakit Hati under the Multimedia Communications Act. That is not hate speech law. But that's the only thing that we have right now. But I wouldn't... Yeah, CMA 233. So I wouldn't call that hate speech legislation. Okay, the next question from Adhika was, I'm going to direct this to Dr. Anthony. Okay, sure. Then we'll ask that one. Capitalism. Sorry, Adhika, could you re-ask the question
It's okay,
again?
I remember the question.
Okay.
Okay, so Adhika asked this question in regards to, is capitalism the cause of disability? All right. Again, I am answering from a medical faculty lecturer background, pure science background. So my answer to you, Adhika, I like capitalism, personally, and I'll tell you why. Personal experience. I had my first MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, and you need an MRI for your brain and your spinal cord. You can't use any other means. All right, so there wasn't a single MRI available in Malaysia in 1987 when I desperately needed to use it. All right, what we did have at that time in Malaysia was a CT scan, and that took images and slices of my brain and my spinal cord, images of that, and it was at Pantai Medical Center. My mother and my mom and dad both, I mentioned earlier, were government servants. So I was a patient at University Hospital. At that time, it was called University Hospital, before it was renamed as Pusat Perubatan Universiti Malaya. And my mother had to pay for my images to be taken at Pantai Medical Center. So yes, I would say that capitalism is a necessity. It actually pushes the boundaries of civilization for greater and better medical health care. But yes, you know, and I think we have underlined this many times, access. It is our access to those technologies that is falling short. And the only thing that we have in our repository is the OKU card, which is why this OKU status cannot be played around. It is highly, it carries a lot of meaning, that OKU card, all right? So I'm not going to fault capitalism in any way, because science and technology cannot move forward without people trying to make money out of something, right? But we do need to have proper laws. We need to have enforceable laws and legislation. It doesn't matter where we are. Even when I was a student abroad, it is my right as an international student to be cared for, which is why I made it a huge point to look after my international students when I was a lecturer at UUM. I climbed up 3 flights of stairs because I wanted to sort out the visa of my Sudanese student. All right. So whatever problems that we are facing in Malaysia is really from a lack of commitment. And I must say that the bottom line is that some people in Malaysia are just more equal than other people. And this is what needs to change.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Naresha. Dr. Anthony, would you like to add on to that answer? Do you think capitalism contributes to inaccessibility? No comment. Okay, great. Because we're running out of time. Yeah, we can do the recap. So the third question from Beatrice was for Sheikh Fada. Do I need to repeat the question, or did you get the gist of it? What we say and what we do, the gap between those two.
Yeah. How I understand it, there are 2 parts to your question. You said that OKU has different categories, and how then do we deal with the different categorization of OKU, and how do we then close the gap between what is in practice and what is it that we hope to achieve, meaning our ideals. I think this is an ongoing process, be it through ANIS or through any department. I mean, ANIS is actually just the brainchild of YB Datuk Siti Maria Mahmud. She created ANIS after hearing the feedback from activists, parents, teachers, that said that, you know, we need to have another agency, a state agency that deals with it. We can't deals with OKU issues, not just hope for JKM, which is at the federal level. So she set up Anak Istimewa Selangor, and it was a brilliant idea. It remains the only state to have one agency, and it works on a very small budget because of the nature of its setup. But what we have done, I'm on the board of advisors, and what we have done is we set up early intervention center. Now there are 2 early intervention center. We train kindergarten teachers under Didik Anis. We give aid under Bantuan Anak Istimewa Selangor. So all this is in a way effort to try and bridge that gap. To say that, okay, let's try and do something, allocate funds, train teachers, train parents. We have training for parents, training for also specialists who need more help, and also centers that are free to all. Of course, the waiting list is really, really long, and it's not easy to get a slot, but we are trying. So what I want to say is, this is not something that we can solve in a day. We must take baby steps and more steps, not just baby steps, more steps. And it gets bigger with time once there is awareness. Because I do realize that the moment there is awareness and political will, things move. And this is what we must get, awareness and political will. And to bridge that gap, every one of us must play a part. Because when it comes to solving issues, giving more help, we need a bigger budget. And who actually passes the budget? It is our representatives. Who actually make these decisions? It is the politicians. So back to square one, we need to push them and make them realize so that they will have that will to want to give a bigger budget or to find another sustainable model for financing. So I'm appealing to actually people who are good in finance, investment bankers, come up with a good financial model so that agencies like ANIS can actually make money and produce better programs for free for all the people. So one of the things that we are trying to do, and it has been announced, is the foundation, Yayasan Anak Istimewa Selangor. We hope to kick it off. It's in the works. So we hope that with a proper foundation, then we can actually have a better sustainable model that can finance Anis's activities. But this is something that everybody needs to work on, and I hope Selangor does not remain to be the only state having this kind of setup. Every state in Malaysia must have their own Anis. Every state in Malaysia. I believe Sarawak is doing something similar, but I think every state in Malaysia must take the issue of OKU children very seriously. And I understand that it sounds as if Anak Istimewa Selangor is only focusing on children, but we hope that the outreach will be bigger so that we are talking about every OKU person within the state. But of course, at the end of the day, everybody must play a part so that we can make this a reality. Thank you.
Okay, so we have less than 5 minutes to summarize everything and answer another question.
Yeah.
So probably Miss Mira, you want to?
So the question was parameters. We 1 minute each at the most. What is the role of the OKU senator? And are they answerable to the disabled community? One for Mira and
Maybe
for
we should
Anthony.
ask a former senator that question rather than me. I have no ambitions of being a senator. Perhaps the former senator can ask.
1 minute. Yeah. And are you answerable to the disabled community?
Yes. Well, I was a former senator and I was also a former member of the Majlis Kebangsaan OKU, right? Okay. At the Majlis Kebangsaan OKU, although it's the highest body, I've raised a lot of questions. Although I'm also a government pensioner, I'm a retired librarian from UM as well. I'm not afraid to ask and to channel. So a lot of things that I brought up was not even answered. It was a general meeting, and then we also wanted whatever decisions taken at Majlis Kebangsaan be made known. And we were told that it'll be put on the website. It never happened. So I don't know. It is not under OSA, Official Secrets Act. It's not under that. So I think we have got to keep on pushing them. So, that's a role. And I did bring up, as a senator, I brought that up as well, to say that there are 14 objectives, there are 14 functions that this strong body has to do. So therefore, we have to make sure that the results are made known. What has been brought up, and this is the result. That was one. Plan Tindakan OKU, which the government came up with. A lot of questions were not answered well. They've got short-term, mid-term, and long-term results. Even the short-term ones, they could not answer. On education, on transportation, on buildings being accessible, all this. So, okay, the role of the senator, you see, we, as you know, that executive, legislative, and judiciary, we belong to the legislative part, where we are lawmakers, laws and policies. So therefore, instead of doing, the general work of, giving out handouts and appearing here and appearing there, there are more important things for a senator to do, i.e. listen to what is needed by the people and what OKUs, groups of OKU, parents have been pushing for, and what the government has done. So this is the main role of the senator. And keep on asking, if they have got a plan Tindakan, whether or not it has been achieved. So these are the things we have to bring up. And whatever we ask, whatever questions is given, can be read in the Hansard. And the Hansard is available. And I know that there's an organization called Boleh, say again? Boleh Space. Boleh Space is going to organize something whereby the government documents can be made available. Freedom of under the Freedom of Information policy. Okay, so the role, I think my 1 minute is
Yeah.
up. Yeah. Sorry, the roles of the senator, you can always go back to the handset and see what had been asked by the late Ismail Saleh,
Sure.
by myself, and by Rashta Diba,
Uh-huh.
and the present senator, who has just started in March. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. For anyone who didn't know, there was Puan Batma, former OKU senator as well. Now, I wanted actually, okay, since we had an answer from a former senator, I'm gonna summarize. Go ahead. I'm not gonna continue with that because we're running really short on time. So I'm gonna ask Nara to summarize. I'm gonna add a bit later as well.
Okay, so in general, you have heard from us, right? It's not what we want. I think that is the essential part of the whole discussion here today. So it's not about what we want, it's about the impact that is gonna affect all of us for all the things that we have talked about. And I really, 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 really hope that there is going to be a benchmark one day where we can live independently in Malaysia without any barriers, right?
Thank you, Nara. Actually, the word benchmark brought up some of my thoughts as well. In summary, I think we've heard this is just very, very surface level stuff. And in summary, we've heard some of the issues that we face, some of the barriers in terms of physical environments, negative social norms, attitudes towards disabled persons. Since Nara brought up benchmark, I guess for me, benchmark is the benchmark for accessibility in Malaysia. For me, is when a wheelchair user can go and enjoy a public beach on their own without having to be driven there, and enjoy the public beach without having people make fun of them. I think that's a very good benchmark for accessibility. So you are looking at built environments, public transportation, and attitudes towards persons with disabilities. And again, respectfully disagreeing, I would not just say push. The idea is that we're not even part of planning and decision making. I can ask Selangor state government right now, 1% profil in the state government. And in terms of disabilities, are you just hiring OKU who are not problematic? That means, okay, let's not hire OKU mental because they're unstable. So this is one of the things, this is not the end of the conversation. I really hope this is the start. I'm really happy to see a lot of younger people here. I'm really happy to see a lot of disabled persons here as well, who are actively voicing out. I think that's one of the things that's really lacking is the space and the time and the opportunity and the respect for our own competence, for our own lived experience and wisdom. I think that's really, really, really part of what gets to me when it comes to disability advocacy in Malaysia, because we are still being talked over. We are still being spoken for, and we're not involved in planning and decision making. And I think that's a really big mistake. Thank you very much to Amelia, and I'm going to hand over the microphone to someone who's slightly less angry than I am. Thank you very much, everyone here. Oh, okay, there's applause.
Just a shameless plug. Boleh Space has our booth upstairs, so you can check us out. And you can also check us out on our website, bolehspace.com, for maybe connections in the future. So because we are trying to make as many connections as possible. Yeah, so thank you so much for the opportunity.
All right, thank you so much to all the